I'm Graham. Here we are on the In-Depth Crew podcast. That's Brad, that's Brian, and here we are, Kimbal Musk in the books. What do you guys think of the episode?
You go first.
I think it's one of our most dynamic ones. I mean, we just did so much with him, and he's lived such a interesting life, and he's lived in so many different worlds in tech, the kitchen, restaurateur. So yeah, I think it's one of our most interesting ones.
What do you think, Brad?
Yeah, to kind of echo Brian a little bit, it's interesting to spend a day with Musk, and on a lot of shoots we do sometimes crazy activities. And this was kind of an interesting episode because we didn't really have that element of it, but we just did so much other interesting, cool stuff with him. I mean, even like driving the car was like, usually I don't like car ride conversations. I don't think they sometimes don't add much. This was like very different because he's literally driving the car, no hands, pointing at the wheel and what's on the screen like as it turns, and it just
that he helped create.
Well, that he helped to create, right. So that was. I mean, it's not in the actual episode for that long. There's a clip associated with it, but it's stuff like that. It added a level of like intrigue and just excitement to it, of something that's usually kind of a more mundane. Okay, here's just the extended part of the interview, but in a car.
It was funny when he was showing me that it did not even register for whatever reason. Initially, I go back and I watch that video. I'm like, man, I look like an idiot here.
Navigate to the kitchen, American Bistro. We're gonna let it drive it to the restaurant.
What's your best guess in terms of how far away we are before it's approved? But, oh, there we go, yeah. Is there anybody that we've profiled that is more interesting than Kimbal?
I don't know necessarily more. I think there's equal parts as interesting, but yeah, just from coming from South Africa, apartheid South Africa, to rising to be one of the most famous families in the world is a remarkable story.
I mean, in terms of backstory, like Misty Copeland obviously has a very interesting story. She's not on the level globally that, Kimbal Musk is. I maybe it's just because it was recent, but I think David Blaine's story is really interesting, and that episode was really dynamic for a lot of different reasons with the magic.
Right, yeah, I was trying to think because there are people that I would argue are as interesting. Blaine's interesting, Tom Hanks, even Richard Branson as example, but I mean, Kimbal was partly responsible for creating two of the world's most important companies and came from literally nothing.
Right.
It's crazy to think that like he got a $15 million payday by selling Zip2, his first company with Elon, and like however many years later he ends up with nothing, and the mindset that you have to take all that money and just you're so hungry to be an entrepreneur, to make a difference, and like, okay, let's take all of this and put it towards something where then all of a sudden it's gone. Like, it's tough to even wrap my brain around that.
And I think to that same point, not only reinvesting it all, but getting that $15 million payout he got for his first company, Zip2, and then going to New York to the French Culinary Institute and getting yelled at and ripped a new one by chefs, just being broken down, being humbled. And then on top of that, you go to be a line cook after that, making like $15 an hour. This guy's a millionaire, and he's like doing these jobs that like you would never think someone of that stature would do.
But yeah, it is interesting because one would think that as you have more financial success, you become more risk averse. Certainly not putting your entire nest egg on the line, but Kimbal and certainly Elon as well, I mean, have like so many times risked everything.
Brian mentioned his chef skills. He cooked for you. What'd you think of the eggs?
They were good. I mean, granted, I think anything that you put half a stick of butter in is gonna taste good.
And so now we have some eggs that are pretty much broken down by the salt. Takes about a minute.
And what difference does that make?
Oh, well, you get the white in the scrambled egg if you don't let it break down.
Okay.
So you're gonna put a dab of butter in there.
That's a dab of butter?
Just a dab,
That's a lot of butter.
it was not just me, right? Like you saw, I mean, I even slowed down when I was rewatching the video. He literally, if there's sticks here, he like there.
I thought the amount of salt he put in too. It was just the amount of salt. He just like dropping the salt. It just kept going and going. I'm like, the whole bowl's gonna be salt.
Right. After we were done shooting, I don't know if you guys noticed, but I like went back and took another bite.
Nice.
Before
So good.
Oh, it was so good. But again, you
yeah.
put that much butter and salt in anything, it's bound to be good.
You were a little bit weirded out by one of his meals at the kitchen.
Was I?
The marrow.
Oh, well, we didn't eat that on camera. We
didn't,
ate that
but-
afterwards.
Right. But you were weirded out by that.
Yeah, I'd never had bone marrow before, and it was like
That's so good.
it's like snot that you're eating. I mean, that's literally what it
It's just like
looks like, and it tastes
It tastes
like I
great.
would imagine
Tastes
snot
great.
would taste.
No, what?
A marrow bone is delicious. I mean, it's a delicacy for a reason. That was when I was in kindergarten. When I had to fill out like a sheet, like my favorite things, I put bone marrow as my favorite food when I was 6 years
Who
old,
are
and
you?
the teacher had to pull me aside, and I think she thought I was a serial killer.
He might be.
You never know.
I don't. We don't know what Brian does when he's not here.
Christiana.
She was awesome.
I think that was my single favorite part of the taping.
Going into the day, they had asked for some examples of how when we had done a couple interviews in the past, and so I sent them some examples, and I think that kind of, relieved some of if there was any anxiety over it. But it still seemed like day of, they were a little bit uncertain, because after you got done with them, Kimbal especially was like, that was fantastic. Like, I really loved how that, came across. So I think you did a good job with it.
I always enjoy when you're talking to, partners or a husband and wife together, because the dynamic's just more fun.
It would have been a big miss for us on the Ambien story if
Oh
we had not
my
had both of them
gosh.
together.
Yeah.
So I mean, Christiana could have told the story, I'm sure, pretty well, but having both of them to go back and forth, especially for that story, was great.
Oh, and the look of just sheer embarrassment on his face when she's telling it is so great.
Oh, he proposed to me on Ambien and then forgot.
Oh, no.
That is a dangerous medicine.
Wait, so how did that go down?
Oh, well, like we were going to bed in a hotel room in New York, and we were like brush our teeth, and we're like getting in bed, and we're like good night, and then like he's laying there a little bit, and he's like, I really got to get over some things so that I can just feel ready to commit and marry you. And I was like, that's fine. You have all the time in the world. We're just, on this journey. And he's like, actually, I'm ready. We should get married. And I was like, oh, wow.
And I don't know if they've done an interview together before, but they should certainly do more of them, because it's entertaining. I believe that was the first time she talked publicly, or at least during an interview, about some of her self-harming tendencies growing up and all of that. The part that I most regret not following up on, and we were just talking about this earlier, Brad, was she spoke about how, because he asks her about what her crazy is, and I think that connected to then him saying he has a little bit of crazy too. I missed a follow-up when she said that she then used that to help him, or something like that, right? And I like such a blatant oversight on my end, and probably is what the episode was most missing, was his vulnerability.
I just think you got a good piece of information and a good vulnerable moment from Christiana. And then so I think at that point, your mind probably shifted towards asking the next thing because you thought you were set on that topic.
How about what was going through your mind when Kimbal was playing some Johnny Cash for you?
Oh, he's talented.
Yeah.
All right, so what do you want to play?
Okay, so this is Johnny Cash. This is an easy one. This is Ring of Fire.
Okay.
burning thing, and it makes a fiery ring. Bound by wild desire, I fell into a ring of fire. I fell into a burning ring of fire. I went down, 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 and the flames went higher, and it burned, burned, burned. The ring of fire, the ring of fire, and it burns, burns, burns. The ring of fire, the ring of fire.
I think the part of that I was most floored by was how he would spend dozens of hours in a week preparing for a show when he would have these shows. Like, I would never have expected him to spend that much time at it. But then you listen to him and you understand, like, that takes, commitment to get there.
I thought he would be good just for that reason. You mentioned how much he practices and everything, but I was still a little nervous because just one of the most awkward situations you can be in life is when you're sitting next to someone and they sing for you and it's not good. Because then, like, you can't pretend to like it. But you have to, and it's just this very like cringe moment. But then once he started singing, he was actually good. I was like, oh, thank God.
Well, and then nobody clapped at the end besides me, which was kind of awkward.
I didn't.
I'm like,
yeah, I did.
Well, we didn't know what the rules were. It's like we don't clap when like you get a good answer on a question.
well, yeah, but when I'm looking around, like, and then nobody's like,
That was pretty funny. I think
That's
I
the
clapped
first-
twice, and then nobody else was supposed to come down.
It's like an interview. That's the first time I've ever actually told that story. Well done.
So I had no intention of making the Elon request when we did this interview. And then I sat down with Kimbal and I'm like, we just spent the day with him talking about his life. And I talked to his mom, May, as part of the prep for it. We talked on camera with Christiana. We talked to his head chef, like all the folks that played key roles in his life. Like, how do we not bring up talking to Elon? And obviously it didn't work out, but I think that's probably my one regret coming out of this, that we didn't get a bite from Elon talking about the role Kimbal has played in his life. Because Kimbal does interviews all the time about Elon. You've never seen Elon do an interview about Kimbal, and each has played just as consequential a role as the other in one another's life.
This episode is so jam-packed. Like, obviously, we would have, if Elon had, graciously accepted and done the interview, we would have found the space for it.
I don't know what we would have cut in this, but I would argue you guys would have cut the cost plus stuff.
I actually weirdly found that interesting.
Brett's shaking his head off camera.
I actually was a proponent to include that.
Yeah, I like that stuff too. That was interesting.
that is probably on the list of things that would have had to get chopped eventually, but I was trying to keep that if possible.
I mean, that's what it's like remarkable. Like, basically, Boeing and Lockheed, their contracts with the government say, we will get paid by the government as long as it takes for us to do this project. And then if it takes a lot longer than planned, we're still going to keep getting paid. And then once we're done, you're going to give us an additional 10%, and that's going to be profit.
And the 10% just keeps getting bigger the more money that gets put into it. So you have no incentive to actually finish the job.
Right. And then SpaceX came around, and they're like, I mean, that sounds like an amazing deal, but, instead of this costing $1 billion like it's normally cost, we'll do it for $50 million. And the government's like, well, wait a sec, we don't want to pay less for this. And SpaceX is like, no. Like, you don't have to pay us unless we complete the task. And by the time SpaceX completed the mission, Boeing had yet to even get something launched, right? Something like that?
Yeah, I don't think they even had a successful launch.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is a startup company.
Yeah. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
They completely changed the way space travel is. Well, and even too, they're actually still kind of trying to for a while to get back to where the space program was in the 60s, and they're getting there now. But it's amazing how much step back the U.S. took in space travel over the last 20 years.
One of the more fascinating people we've ever covered. For Brad, Brian, I'm Graham. Goodbye.